On a quiet March day in 2018 in Clermont, Florida, the silence was shattered by the arrival of law enforcement at what appeared to be an ordinary private home. Their attention was drawn to a concrete slab in the backyard, its surface engraved with two names, Lori and Travis. Though it seemed innocuous, that slab would become the focal point of a chilling investigation. A specially trained dog, skilled in detecting human remains, led investigators directly to the slab. The homeowner, Lori Shiver, who only weeks earlier had claimed that beneath the slab was a mere duck pond, now watched nervously as events unfolded. When the dog indicated the slab and ground-penetrating radar revealed a hollow void beneath it, it became clear that something far more sinister was at play. Under a warrant-authorized excavation, layers of cement were peeled back. Beneath them, officers found a bundle wrapped in blue tarp, tied with green rope. Inside were fully skeletonized human remains. The house was registered in Lori's name, but legally her husband, Michael Shiver, remained listed as a resident. According to her account, he had left 3 years earlier and simply never returned. Since his disappearance, she had filed no missing person report, never contacted law enforcement, and had made no effort to determine his fate. Thus began a probe that would reveal the mysterious disappearance had spanned 3 years, during which someone had masterfully sustained the illusion that Michael Shiver was still alive. The central question at the outset of the case was deceptively simple. Who lay beneath that slab? And why had nobody noticed the man was gone? By 2018, when police finally uncovered the slab, Michael was officially still considered alive. His wife had claimed that he vanished in November 2015, supposedly choosing to start a new life. To neighbors, she said he'd moved north. To family, she claimed she didn't know his whereabouts. From mid-November onward, Michael stopped communicating. He never showed up at work, ignored calls, and avoided meeting friends. A few days later, his employer received a letter. Michael asked to be terminated and told them not to search for him. The supervisor attempted phone calls, but only brief email replies were received. Friends noticed oddities as well. No new photographs, just infrequent social media posts consisting of neutral quotes and random images. His profile looked less like a living person's and more like a facade maintained for appearance's sake. Family members didn't immediately suspect foul play. At that time, Michael's mother fell seriously ill and his brother repeatedly tried to reach him to come to the hospital. The responses were terse. Busy, can't come. Eventually, they stopped altogether. His mother died, never seeing her son again. The family assumed he had simply withdrawn, but the signs of trouble only mounted. Bank cards were unused, his vehicle repossessed for debt, licenses and documents expired. Despite the obvious signs of disappearance, no alarm was raised. The prevailing belief was that Michael was living somewhere far off, unwilling to engage, and this was further aided by regular, though later revealed as fake, social media updates, sustaining the illusion of his continued presence. Nearly 3 years passed in silence. No one really searched for him. After all, everyone believed he was still out there somewhere, writing, working, living. Only when the fake presence became too unconvincing did his circle start to ask, if Michael had truly walked away, why, in all those years, did he never return to his wife or his former life? To understand how the Shiver family spiraled into tragedy, you have to go back to where it all began, a small town in upstate New York in the mid-1990s. Life moved slow there, and the local middle school had only around 500 students. It was the 7th grade where Lori and Michael first met. Michael was quiet, didn't care much for school, and dropped out soon after. Lori's parents saw the warning signs. How could a kid without a diploma support a family? They sat him down, and perhaps that talk was the catalyst. He went back, finished school, earned his diploma, and later enrolled in college. His relationship with Lori stayed strong, and a few years later, they tied the knot. In 2006, their daughter Isabel was born. For Michael, it was a milestone. He craved stability and a fresh purpose. He got his pilot's license and landed a job in his field, fulfilling a childhood dream. Lori ran the home and took care of their daughter. On the surface, they seemed like the perfect couple, but beneath that calm exterior tension was building. The Shivers' life was full of moves. After Isabel's birth, they relocated multiple times. They first went to Florida, then almost immediately moved back to New York, and then changed states again. Michael continuously sought opportunities, never settling. His passions included aviation and engineering. He even started building his own plane. Lori wanted permanence. Michael wanted motion. As a result, the family lived in constant flux. By the time they finally settled in Florida, the marriage already had a crack, one that no sheet of concrete could ever fill. By the early 2000s, the Shivers had been together nearly a decade. Outwardly, their life looked stable. Michael working, Lori at home with their daughter. But around that time, worrying talk began to surface in their circle. Lori was the first to speak up. One day she called her mother and said Michael had struck her after a workout. Later she claimed he acted without reason, right after taking a shower. She said bruises were there, but when family offered to go to law enforcement, Lori refused. She said she didn't want a scene and believed her husband just lost it. Later, she mentioned another incident, this time allegedly over a cookie dispute. The situation sounded absurd, but there was no proof. Signs of harm disappeared quickly, and no reports were ever filed. With each new story, relatives grew increasingly uneasy. Some suspected domestic aggression, others thought Lori was seeking attention. Michael, in contrast, appeared calm, reserved. At work, he was described as focused and non-confrontational, never late and never raising his voice. By 2015, tensions in the family had reached a breaking point. Acquaintances noticed the couple barely spoke. Their home felt strained, yet neither left nor confronted the other. Friends recall that Michael increasingly stayed late at work or traveled for business to avoid going home. Lori, on the other hand, said her husband had started controlling her, watching her every move, showing signs of jealousy. At this point, the narrative of domestic aggression had taken on a troubling ambiguity. In private conversations with her close circle, Lori would speak of constant fears, yet she never once followed through by obtaining a protective order. There were no medical records, no photographs, and no reports made to law enforcement. When any of his friends attempted to bring up the subject with Michael, he did not deny that there were issues in the household, but chalked them up to fatigue and the stress of constant moving. Gradually, trust in Lori began to erode. People started to notice that her stories didn't align. Events were jumbled, timelines mismatched. Meanwhile, Michael continued to present as a rational man, not the type to erupt in anger. All of this created a split perception within their circle. Some believed Lori was the victim, while others suspected she was manipulating the situation to put pressure on her husband. By mid-November 2015, their marriage had effectively become a formality. It was at that time that Lori informed family members that Michael was leaving and had no intention of coming back. That was the last real mention of Michael as a living person. What followed signaled the beginning of a far darker chapter. By the fall of 2015, it appeared as though Michael Shiver simply grew weary of the life he'd built. Lori told relatives he had left without explanation, abandoned his personal belongings and important documents. She didn't reveal his destination, only adding that she felt a sense of relief when he was gone. From that day on, no one ever saw Michael again. His employer noted his absence immediately. He failed to report to work, gave no notice. A few days later, an email arrived from his account in which he reportedly announced his resignation and stated he would not return. The tone of the message raised concerns. It was terse and devoid of the writing style Michael usually displayed. He had always been meticulous, verbose, yet this one was a blunt one-liner and a period. Attempts to reach him by phone were futile. Messages went unanswered. Even when Michael seemingly did respond to certain acquaintances, the tone and wording were unnatural. as if someone else had been typing. As friends and colleagues wondered what was happening, Lori wasted no time. She began quickly liquidating Michael's belongings, from tools to personal items, favoring cash transactions. There was no mention of contacting law enforcement. She claimed he simply left, and searching was pointless. When Michael failed to show at work for more than a week, his supervisor notified Human Resources, but no formal missing person report was filed. On paper, Michael had submitted his resignation. Thus began the period in which Michael gradually ceased to exist. By 2017, he remained only on paper. In reality, it was as though he never existed. His family never filed a report. They received the occasional short message, "I'm okay," or "Don't worry." It is now known those emails were sent from Lori's computer as part of the facade she maintained to keep up the illusion of her husband's existence. For those around her, it was easier to accept that version of events. Nobody wanted to interfere in what appeared to be a private tragedy, so the deception held strong for so long. Online, Michael's profile still showed activity, but in the real world, his trail had vanished. By the end of 2017, all that remained of the man were old posts and photographs. Everything else had disappeared alongside him. In February 2018, one of Michael's friends reached out to law enforcement to report that it had been 3 years since he'd seen him in person, and he suspected Michael was dead. The investigation revealed a strange picture. No purchases made, no housing leases signed, no vehicle registrations in Michael's name during all that time. On paper, Michael was still listed at the address where his wife, Lori, lived. On arriving at the suburban home, law enforcement officers found Lori Shiver standing calmly at the door, repeating the familiar story. Her husband had walked out without saying goodbye. The house appeared well kept, but their attention was drawn to the backyard where a concrete slab sat in place. Lori explained she had poured the slab to cover an old pit dug by her husband, Michael Shiver, a pond that never materialized. Detectives returned with a search warrant. Lori's demeanor shifted. She became irritable, denied access to the yard, and asked the officers to leave the property. A few days later, the investigators obtained court authorization to search the site. On March 9, 2018, they returned, this time with a specially trained canine unit. The cadaver dog indicated the concrete slab without hesitation. Once removed, workers uncovered a bundle wrapped in blue tarp and bound with green rope. Inside, skeletal human remains. The body was sent for forensic examination. Dental records confirmed the identity, Michael Shiver. The medical examiners concluded the cause of death, a gunshot wound to the back of the head. The bullet matched a .38 caliber pistol registered to Lori. When asked where the weapon was, she claimed it had been lost a long time ago, or perhaps stolen. No theft report had ever been filed. Further analysis revealed every social media post and email sent in Michael's name came from the IP address belonging to the Shiver residence. In conversations with friends, the writing style shifted noticeably from the genuine Michael's tone. Lori was the only person in the entire period who never attempted contact with her husband, despite her assertions that he had disappeared. Investigators collected a chain of evidence: the concrete slab, the matching IP address, the caliber of the weapon, and Lori's suspicious behavior. Taken together, these details undermined the voluntary departure story Michael's wife had promoted. At this stage, the police were confident. Michael did not leave that home alive, and Lori had likely staged his disappearance, maintaining the illusion of his absence for years. As detectives reconstructed the final years of Lori's life after Michael's disappearance, they uncovered nearly as many secrets surrounding her as around the crime itself. After her husband vanished, she did not retreat into isolation. She developed relationships with at least 2 men, Jeremy Townsend and Travis Fillmore. Both entered her life after Michael, by Lori's timeline, had left. But ultimately, their statements turned the investigation into a tangled web of contradictions. In 2016, Lori met Jeremy. He lived nearby, helped with household tasks, and soon became part of her life. Neighbors reported he often stayed overnight at her house and eventually moved in full-time. Lori referred to him as a family friend, but the truth became obvious. Jeremy later admitted that he knew about Michael's disappearance, yet Lori claimed her husband had simply left and did not intend to return. Travis Fillmore appeared in 2017. A young, fit construction worker, he was one of the men who helped pour the concrete in the backyard, the very slab where the body was discovered. His name, alongside Lori's, was engraved on the slab's surface. Following Lori's arrest, she claimed the inscription represented a new start. During questioning, the version of events provided by Lori unexpectedly shifted. She claimed that the crime had been committed by Jeremy. According to her account, he shot Michael after an argument, and although she tried to intervene, she became frightened and helped conceal the body. Jeremy denied the allegation, stating that he was unaware of the crime and first heard of it from investigators. He added that Lori had appeared calm, and if he had suspected anything wrong, he would have contacted the authorities long ago. However, his version too had weak points. Photos were found on Jeremy's phone of the backyard slab during the time when Lori said Michael was already dead. The pictures showed the concrete pouring process. When asked why he had taken the photos, he replied he was simply documenting the work. Investigators noted that in some of those shots a blue tarp was visible, similar to the one in which the remains were later found. Lori's story changed several times. At first it was, Jeremy killed Michael. Then, we hid the body together. Later, someone else, possibly Travis, pulled the trigger. Travis, however, was quickly ruled out of suspicion. He had an alibi, and Lori had earlier claimed he only helped with the slab, unaware of what lay beneath. Data analysis showed that all digital traces linked to the fictitious life of Michael pointed back to Lori's home and Jeremy's access. That meant the fake online persona of Michael was being maintained at a time when Lori already had new relationships. Investigators concluded that she intentionally supported the illusion of her husband's presence in order to hide his death and live without suspicion. The investigation also revealed this. Lori systematically distorted facts. She changed details and dates, mixing up her own statements. Each interrogation contradicted the prior one. Jeremy and Travis offered varying accounts, but it was Lori who directed the narrative, steering investigators where she could buy time. Gradually, law enforcement realized that the entire story, from Michael's emails to his supposed disappearance, was a meticulously planned operation. For 3 years, Lori told everyone Michael had left after a breakup, while the body remained just beneath her. Her new lovers were part of her new life, unaware they were living over the scene of the crime. That contrast between overt calmness and cold calculation became the hallmark of the Shiver case. By the time of Lori's arrest, the police were no longer in doubt. The lie she had built for years collapsed along with the concrete slab under which Michael was found. After the discovery of the remains, Lori Shiver was not charged immediately. The investigators spent nearly 2 years gathering evidence. In 2020, she was formally charged with second-degree homicide. She was arrested in Florida, where she had been living openly, not far from the slab beneath which Michael was buried. During interrogations, Lori insisted her actions were in self-defense, claiming the night in question began with a fight and that Michael threatened her with a firearm. Her defense lawyers crafted a case rooted in a history of domestic aggression. At trial, Lori's earlier stories of being struck were introduced, but there were no official documents to confirm them. The prosecution pressed the point. No signs of a physical struggle were found in the house, and the nature of the wound, a shot to the back of the head, indicated the victim was likely turned away when shot. That scenario completely contradicted the self-defense version. During the investigation, new details came to light. Neighbors recalled that soon after the suspected date of the crime, a strong odor of decay lingered around the property. Lori said she was keeping a pig and burning its feed, and that explanation was accepted, though later forensic experts confirmed the smell was consistent with a decomposing body. Significant discrepancies also emerged around the time of death. Medical examiners determined that Michael died closer to late 2015, whereas Lori claimed he left a few weeks after Christmas. The mismatches between her statements and the analytic findings became one of the prosecution's key arguments. By 2023, the case file ran hundreds of pages, printouts of communications, bank records, forensic reports. Before trial opened, prosecutors declared the crime had been premeditated. In response, the defense maintained the act was committed in a moment of intense emotional distress. The court proceedings began in 2024, and that is when a statement emerged in the courtroom that could dramatically shift the direction of the case. Lori's daughter, 15-year-old Isabel, unexpectedly took the stand. Up until that moment, she had not been involved in the process and was under the care of relatives. At the hearing, the girl said 4 words that changed everything. "I shot Dad." According to Isabel, the incident took place when she was 7 years old. That night, her parents were arguing, and the father, she claimed, hit her mother. She said she picked up the nearby pistol and fired to protect her mother. Afterward, Lori allegedly helped dispose of the body and promised everything would be forgotten. The girl said for years she believed the shot was an accident, and her mother had been hiding her action. The admission shocked both prosecution and defense. The prosecution's narrative was built on a version of a planned crime, but Isabel's words challenged the whole construct. Nevertheless, investigators had serious doubts. Experts could not confirm that a 7-year-old could accurately fire a .38 caliber pistol into the back of an adult's head. Moreover, no child's fingerprints were found on the weapon. The prosecution offered a theory that the confession might be part of Lori's defense strategy. The girl may have repeated what she heard from her mother, believing it was a memory. Investigators reminded everyone Isabel had been under Lori's influence for years and may simply have absorbed her mother's version of events. Psychologists appointed by the court explained that young memory is vulnerable to suggestion. Under prolonged emotional pressure, a child can genuinely believe in events that never occurred. Nevertheless, the defense used the admission to argue that Lori did not plan the crime, but merely helped her daughter avoid accountability. Legally, the situation became a stalemate. If Isabel's statement were true, the offense was committed by a minor who could not bear criminal responsibility at the time. If the admission was false, it meant Lori used her own daughter as a tool for defense. The court never fully resolved where Isabel's memory ended and her mother's influence began. But that very confession turned the trial into not only a criminal process, but also a moral reckoning, a question about the boundaries of truth, guilt, and maternal power. In the summer of 2024, the Florida court delivered its verdict in the case of Lori Shiver. The jury found her guilty of second-degree homicide. The judge emphasized that the evidence clearly indicated Michael died from a gunshot wound to the back of the head, and that the subsequent actions were aimed at meticulously concealing the crime. The arguments of self-defense and the testimony of the daughter were rejected as unfounded. During the hearings, neighbors and family friends testified. They unanimously stated that Michael never displayed aggression. One witness recalled that shortly before the disappearance he was planning home repairs and spoke of making peace with his wife. These testimonies dismantled the image of a tyrannical husband that Lori had cultivated for years. Michael's relatives insisted on formally clearing his name of any suspicion of aggression. The mother of the deceased addressed the court, saying her son had become a victim of false allegations, and now she wished for only one thing: that he no longer be referred to as a monster. For the jurors, the tipping factor was Lori's post-homicide conduct, liquidating assets, sending fake emails, and social media posts. The court deemed this not as self-defense but as a calculated deception. Ultimately, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Even after the verdict, the Shiver story continues to stir debate. Some believe Lori acted out of fear and pressure, others see a cold-blooded plan. The true circumstances of that night remain a mystery. Was it an accidental shot, a sudden rage-filled moment, or a premeditated crime? The end of this story threw no concrete answers, only a question. Where is the line between truth and convenient lies? And how long can an illusion survive if it's maintained every single day?